everyone. I'm going to be talking to you today about the second half of April and the new moon that we have coming up in Aries on the 17th. I'm filming this a couple of days early because just April is a huge month. I think we can already see that in various aspects of society unfolding all around us. The second half in particular, I think, is going to be extremely important. So we can all sense this year of the fire horse, really that energy coming in very powerfully in April, particularly the second half. The new moon, I'm going to be showing the chart in a little while, for the new moon in Aries on the 17th has more orbiting bodies in Aries than I have ever seen in my astrological career. So the energy is like a surge. It's like a tidal wave, and particularly because it's a 1 year, as we know, and all of the planets are now moving direct until May the 6th, there's this tremendous sense of momentum. So although Aries is a sign of primal fire, this feels like a tidal wave of energy, an unstoppable tidal wave. Now, yes, at a lower level, we're probably all aware that Aries is ruled by Mars, so it's linked to war and aggression and fighting, but it has a much higher level of expression, which is where we've really got to focus, because remember, from February the 20th, when we had that Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 of Aries, that was signaling pure potentiality for humanity, where we have more of a blank canvas than we've ever had before to create a much more loving and abundant world. So all of our thoughts, our feelings, our actions right now are more important than ever as we're putting those first layers of paint on the canvas, because we really are now building that new energetic architecture of light to take us to a much more loving world. So be super conscious of, as you move through your days, and gratitude helps that, actually. Being grateful for the sun coming up, grateful for the trees, grateful for blue sky, grateful for friendship, etc., etc. At a higher level, Aries energy is about sovereignty, big sign for sovereignty, independence, self-sufficiency, courage, bravery, being a pioneer, taking a risk. And it's the sign where there's a very strong physicality around Aries. If you know anyone who has strong Aries emphasis, or maybe you do, you have to, it's kind of, you've got to be in the body. You've got to be kind of physically active and doing, whether you're sporty or whether you're just busy around the home, you've got to be physically doing. So there's a sense of, I am alive, I'm vibrant. There's that kind of sense of vitality that comes through with strong Aries energy. And although at a lower level, Mars and Aries are to do with kind of an instinctive primal urge, at a higher level of expression, they represent divine will, where you transmute that instinctive kind of almost animalistic urge, which is very impulsive and reactive, into something that has much more of a spiritual focus that becomes divine will. It's like love is a fire. It's that kind of a feeling. Also important this month, all the way through the month until the 26th, we have, in fact, from the 6th to the 26th, precisely, we have Uranus at the anaretic degree of Taurus, 29 degrees of Taurus, the very last degree of the zodiac, because on the 26th of April, it moves into Gemini until 2033. So this is the very last outer planet to change sign. It's a big deal. And therefore, it's signaling potential volatility around Earth-based things. Taurus represents the Earth, fixed Earth, or Gaia. So Uranus is the planet of seismic activity, earthquakes, volcanoes, that kind of thing, tectonic plate shifts. But it also, because Taurus is linked to banking and currency, we could see a lot of financial volatility. We're seeing that already. But really all the way through virtually till the end of April, that's very strong. Uranus at that 29-degree point is also, by the way, square to the ascendant Mars and Regulus of the US president. Now, the ascendant is your identity, your confidence, how you project yourself to the world. It's also your health axis. Mars is obviously fight, aggression, assertion, and a Uranus-Mars square signals a lot of impulsivity. Mars is also in his 12th house of hidden enemies. Regulus is right, it's a fixed star, which is right on his ascendant, which is to do with, in mythology, to do with kingship or a sense of kingship. Mars rules his 9th house of legalities and foreign relations. So Uranus is forming transiting Uranus is forming a T-square to all of those points. And once Uranus moves on in late April, it will not come back to that point again. So we could see some quite sudden or radical shifts for the US president in the sense I've described, and also all from this point on through to the end of the year, he has solar arc Neptune opposing his sun. Now, that is that's an excellent transit if you're on a spiritual path, because it's very refining and purifying for your spirituality. But if you're not so much on the spiritual path, it can kind of give you a energy wipeout. Your energy gets lower, and it can suggest some kind of slight confusion or slight frailty in some way. But we will see. We will see what unfolds, and I'll show you this chart for the new moon in just one moment. But just to note, just the day before we get there, the Sun is exactly conjunct Chiron at 25 of Aries. And of course, the Sun comes around to Chiron every year, but it's, given the bigger context of everything we're looking at, and Chiron has been in Aries since 2018, and I'd suggest, particularly from 2020 onwards, we have this very strong sense of victimhood. Aries is I am, I exist, I have a right to exist, I'm sovereign, I operate from my center, my inner authority, etc. And there's a greater sense of that being wounded over the last few years. And so, and if you have it natally, as I've mentioned, then you often have a sense in your very early years of, I don't have a right to exist for whatever reason. But the purpose of it is meant to be turned into leadership. And so isn't it fascinating that the day before this new moon, with this massive pileup of planets, which you'll see in a moment for in Aries, is actually happening. It's the release of victimhood, that we have to put down the baggage of victimhood, of any victimhood we felt before, the day before we get to that full moon, because this is such an initiation and ignition point with so many planets in Aries. So, the old stories, if I'm not good enough, young enough, pretty enough, rich enough, I'm always a loser. He did to me, she did to me, he said to me, she said, blah. All of that. You can't drag that ball and chain, or those balls and chains, into the new earth, and the new earth that is a frequency within you that you are embodying, because it won't work very well. You're dragging the past into your future. You're handicapping your future before you even really start. So I really want to alert you to that. So let go the victim script. That's a very strong signal the day before the 16th before the new moon coming up on the 17th. And I just want to, going back to America, I just want to show you the chart for Washington. For instance, if we set this chart for Washington, D.C. at the new moon, and I'll show you the chart for the new moon based on the UK in a moment, are two huge archetypes for change. Pluto, which is deep, fundamental, permanent change, snake shedding a skin, is right on the midheaven. I mean, Pluto's at 5 degrees of Aquarius, the midheaven here, which is the government, the leadership, at this time at 4 degrees. So super tight conjunction, some kind of major shift. And also we have Uranus, the planet of sudden radical change, very close to the ascendant. And what that means is, at the time of the Aries new moon, the identity that's projected by the America, and because it's Washington, D.C., it's got a governmental focus, a leadership focus. We will see what unfolds. And also in the chart for the US, don't forget, we have transiting Neptune right at the IC, conjunct the IC, right on 1-2 degrees of Aries. I'll stop sharing this chart here. Okay, so let's take a look at this chart for the new moon in Aries. And this is set for the UK, as always. This is where I live. So unless you live here, ignore the clock face, ignore the houses. But even if you know nothing about astrology, look at the enormous weighting of planets in Aries. It's just more than I've ever known. If we count them up, 1, 2, 3, plus Manwe, 4, 5, Salacia, Eris, Chiron, Sun, Moon, 10 orbiting bodies in Aries. That's extraordinary. And just the amount of weight, if you like, on that side of the chart, quite staggering. So as always with the new moon, you have the sun and moon together here. They're at 27, 29 of Aries. So look in your own chart and see where that falls, 27 degrees of Aries. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download a free birth chart from my website, then go to the link below. You can buy a 2-part video series that you can watch to infinity, forever, to help you understand where that point falls in your chart and what that means for you in terms of the area of life. And you can use them, as I say, as many times as you like for every update I do. So here we have the sun and moon conjunct Eris, conjunct Chiron and Eris as well. Now, I've talked about Chiron because the sun comes to conjunct Chiron the day before, exactly. And I've talked about letting that victim script go. I can just sort of see a whole old wooden chest of cobwebs and cockroaches and dust, and that you've run those stories through your mind dozens and hundreds of times, and you can't drag that into your future if you want a fresh, new, different, vibrant future. And so the new moon conjunct Chiron and Eris, and as I've spoken before, I think it's really important now just to reiterate that both Chiron and Eris are a distortion of the Aries energy, because the Aries energy has this authenticity, this vibrancy, this vitality of I am, I know who I am. Whereas Chiron is wounded, and Eris, as you remember in the myth, was the only one who wasn't invited to the wedding. So she turned up anyway and created mayhem by throwing a golden apple into the center of the circle of goddesses and saying, "For the fairest," and they all squabbled. And that squabble was said to allegedly lead to the Trojan War. So she's known as the goddess of chaos and discord, but her symbolism is around that sense of exclusion. I wasn't included. the sense of being outed or on the periphery of society. And so Eris demands truth, she demands justice, she demands total social inclusion. So at this new moon, this is saying very loudly, we're going to let that distortion go. We're going to let that distortion go, because we are going to move forwards with Mars here in its own sign very strongly of being the inner warrior, and again transmuting those primal instincts into divine will. So you are in alignment with divine will as well as your own wishes. So, and also Mars here is exact to the degree conjunct Manwë. Manwë, you remember, in Tolkien's creation myth, was the highest archangel closest to the mind of God. And with his wife Vada, Manwë was said to create our cosmos. So very much a symbol of rebirth here. So tremendously strong Aries energy. As I say, it's all about this vigor, this vitality, this sovereignty, this living from the inside out, etc. And it's so dynamic with all of that Aries energy, and clearly there's an awful lot going on in the world already. It would be easy to feel that the world was coming at us. So really watch your nervous system. So find a default method, whatever it is, whether it's more meditation, being in nature, hugging a tree, breath work, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, candle gazing, whatever it is, find your way of very rapidly bringing yourself back to center. So your energy isn't kind of scattered and thrown all over the place. There's going to be an awful lot of drama out there. So keep bringing yourself back to self, back to your center. And although Saturn-Neptune, with all the AI, does suggest it's going to be hard to know what's true, what's not out there, with all this Aries energy, we will have a sense of clarity about ourselves. We'll become much clearer about who we are from the inside out, as it were. And remember that we have the power to change collective consciousness, because intention and consciousness change reality. There's 10 tons of evidence on that now. So keep focusing at this rebirth time, this Aries ignition, initiation, rebirth. Keep focusing our collective intention on a vision for a more loving and abundant world, where we have mutual respect for all loving beings. We see humanity coming together, recognizing our similarities, moving towards unity consciousness, rather than seeing our differences. The polarity, the separation, I'm right, you're wrong, judgment, tit for tat. We have to let that go to make progress in our evolution. But there is here, with all these Aries energy, a sense of drive and speed and dynamism. Remember, all planets direct until the 6th of May as well. Firehorse year. So it is like this tremendous surge of energy. I just keep thinking of a kind of a tidal wave of energy, a tsunami of energy. On the 16th, the day before this new moon, Mercury is conjunct to Neptune. And this is great for your intuition, your imagination. Your intuition should be very sharp. And this is about envisaging your future, or our future collectively. Envisaging the dream and taking action on it, Aries. On the 19th, Mars comes to conjunct Saturn, and that gives tremendous discipline and focus in whatever project you're working on, whatever task you're focused on. Really good to see things through to the end. It is also linked, I have to say, to militarization, some kind of military movements happening. On the 20th, Mercury is conjunct Mars. Now that's very quick thinking, very resourceful thinking. Can be sharp, angry words, so do take a breath before you respond. The same day, a little later in the day, Mercury then moves on. it's more like the 21st actually, Mercury moves on to conjunct Saturn. Now that is, again, tremendously focused thinking, great concentration. It can also suggest trade is limited. Mercury trade, Saturn is limited. And we're thinking and talking a lot about oil. Neptune represents oil. What will stabilize us to some extent with all of this Aries energy happening is Venus is in her own sign of Taurus now, and it stays there until the 23rd of April. And so this is the love of nature, the love of the colours, the beauty of nature, tuning into the natural rhythms of nature. So nature could be your antidote to all of this very surging Aries energy. On the 22nd and 23rd, Venus comes to conjunct Uranus. That could also suggest, we're seeing it already, but even more volatility in currencies and banking. That's Taurus. If these are falling, if the very last few degrees of Taurus are falling in your 5th or 7th houses and you're looking for a relationship, this could bring someone out of the blue who's younger, very different background to you, could be foreign, could be a bit bohemian, and it could be a very exciting out of the blue relationship. So be aware of that too. Pluto is in sextile, this blue line here, to all of these planets in early Aries, Neptune, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. And this is about really a transformation at the level we think and act. That we think and act. It's much more conscious rather than instinctive, because Aries tends to be very quick and instinctive. Whereas if we look at the seed point of the Pluto-Neptune conjunction, that was in 1891 to 1893, which was the birth of quantum physics. That reality was for the first time really being linked to our consciousness and how our consciousness affects that. So this is really going to help us be much more conscious as we move forwards in our thinking, our feeling, which is a great thing, because this is part of our mastery. Homer in quincunx to certainly Neptune and Mercury and Mars is very much about regeneration as well. Regeneration of the earth and regeneration of us biologically from the inside out. Reinforcing that, we have Uranus in this long-term conjunction to Sedna, becomes exact at the end of May. Sedna also representing a biological metamorphosis. But this is also a sense of ignition. It's a wave of truth. It's an awakening. It's an opening up of our consciousness, which is this is potentially a very big wave of awakening for people. People who are suddenly going to see a lot of truths that they hadn't seen before. This is a big surge potentially for awakening more people and opening up our consciousness. Now, also, I recently, a few days ago, put out a video called Saturn Sextile Pluto. And that's this here, Saturn sextile Pluto. And although that didn't sound like a very exciting title, it was actually really quite an exciting theme I was talking about, because again, if you go back to the seed point of this Saturn Pluto aspect, it was at the beginning of 2020, January the 12th, that kicked off the whole pandemic. Pluto intensifies whatever it touches, and Saturn's about top-down control, rules, regulations, so it intensified that top-down control and the rules and regulations. So we've now moved to, this is a positive aspect, it's a sextile. So if another such experience arrived where we were confronted with more very tight rules, regulations, whether it's to do with the disease or energy rationing or whatever, this is really asking the question, how would you react humanity, how would you react? Because our consciousness has grown a great deal over the last 6 years. Would you react in the same way? And I just pose that question to you for you to think about. But what this is absolutely about is about new parallel social structures being born. New parallel social structures being formed. They're happening super quietly. You're not going to see them or hear about them unless you know people who are doing this. For instance, just yesterday, I happened to be in conversation with two people I know pretty well. Both of them last week have resigned from their very conventional jobs and bought properties, one of which is already off-grid, but both of them are in very remote rural places, and they are just exiting the system. You're not going to see that on the nightly news. You know, they are just very quietly saying, I'm not happy living like this, and I'm going to exit the system. There are thousands of people all over the world doing that. Just literally 5 minutes before I hopped on, somebody else wrote to me about that. So now I mentioned in the Satellite Sextile Pluto video that I couldn't remember the name of a lady who I saw being interviewed about a year ago, and a couple of people wrote to me and gave me her name. Her name is Cynthia Tina, and she runs something called Eco Village Tours, and I'll put the link for her website below. I saw her being interviewed, about a year ago maybe, by somebody called Dan Aston Gregory. I'll put the link for that interview below if I can find it, if it's still up on his channel. But she was extremely knowledgeable. She's in contact with about 300 what she called intentional communities all over the world. And so I've had no personal contact with Cynthia. You know, she was very impressive in that interview, but I've had no personal dealings. So please do your own research on that. But certainly her company seems to have a good reputation, and that could be a start point if you're thinking of such things. But for sure, because the old is cracking, crumbling, and dying, already in that vacuum, parallel social structures are being formed. And just know that is going to be a growing movement, because as soon as Uranus moves into Gemini on the 26th of April, and I'll do a whole separate video on that because it will be there till 2033, Uranus is freedom and Gemini is your day-to-day life. That is going to bring in so many other changes of our sensing our multidimensionality, shifting to other dimensions in general, being able to see and communicate with galactic beings and elementals, speaking your truth clearly and powerfully and authentically. It's going to be a revolution in transport, in communication and technology. I mean, so many things, but I'll leave that for a separate video. But just the fine thing, and also just to say also that Uranus is the planet to do with freedom, as I say, humanitarianism. It's the planet most linked to the galactic beings. It's the outsider, big time. It's the outsider, and it is moving into the sign Gemini of non-conformism. And don't forget all Rosie Finn's wonderful, very detailed research that as of August last year, 2025, until December 2035, we are in a period of Pluto moving out of bounds to the south, which means society in general is more rebellious and revolutionary. The power is coming from the base, the people, increasingly less and less from the top. And she's done just a sensational analysis. I'll put the link for that conversation as well below if you haven't seen it. Hats off to Rosie. I think she spent 20 years doing it. And remember also that once Uranus moves into Gemini, this trine here to Pluto is now what's called an in-sign trine, which means they're both in the same element of air. And that makes that trine stronger. The seed point for that was 1965, 1966. So summer of love, late 60s, time of the hippies, a lot of rebellion and revolution against the Vietnam War, a lot of demands for much greater equality for gay people, women, black people. There's a lot of changes in general in civil rights legislation. Not that that went far enough, but certainly that brought in that discrimination on the basis of race in public places was banned. That was very particular to America. But so, we're going to get all of those themes coming back in. So I'm going to stop sharing this here. And this will make you kind of laugh or cry, but I looked at the Sabian symbol for 28 degrees of Aries, because you have to round up to the next degree to look at the Sabian symbol. And it's quite remarkable. A large audience confronts the performer who disappointed its expectations. A large audience confronts the performer who disappointed its expectations. I think that could apply to a lot of leadership across the world. So just really step into this stronger sense of power that is available to us at this new moon in Aries. Really feel that, and really become aware of being, a frequency manifester, because whatever you're thinking and feeling and broadcasting, that is interacting with the plasma all around you to pull events and experiences out of the quantum soup, to pull the particles out of the waves, to make them manifest. And it's your frequency that does that. So, really start to sense, living from the inside out, that you are a manifester, you are a creator, you are powerful, and that your state of being is your absolutely top priority to make everything work in your life in a smoother way. And don't forget, this evolutionary wave is moving through us. We're like antennae or lighthouses, because we're transducing the high frequency energy coming from our central sun, and also from the inner core of the earth. And it's going through our physicality. That's what's so extraordinary about this evolutionary leap. And we are having to hold very strong in love, in peace, in coherence, to be able to transmute that successfully. So that's where you hold yourself and really feel like you are the leader of your life. You are the hero of your life. And while I was preparing for this, a song kept playing in my mind, and sadly I can't play it in this video, otherwise I'd get a copyright strike. But it's a song I'm sure you all know, and I really recommend you go and listen to it. It's a song by Mariah Carey called Find the Hero Inside Yourself. And I find that a deeply emotional song. Find the hero inside yourself, because if you've gone through any hard times, this song really helps you to dig even deeper and still find that hero inside yourself. So I really recommend, because it's inspiring, it's motivating, and it's just so deeply human to, yes, the victim side we've been, and I'm not excluded from that. I spent a couple of decades as a world-class doormat as well. We've all been there one way or another. But we are finding the hero now. We're stepping into a different state of being, a level of consciousness. But this is a very big month. I think the second half of April is even bigger than the first, particularly from the 17th onwards. Mars is in Aries. It moves into Aries, its own sign, so it's super, super powerful here on the 10th of April, and it stays there until the 20th of May. So there's very high energy over that period. But if I was asked to choose two peak months in this year, I would say April and July. This is a peak month. We're going to have evolutionary waves moving all through this year. April is one of them, for sure. And as I said, it's like this tidal wave of energy. So protect your nervous system. Get into that habit right now before we, get too far into April. And just so it's a default of dropping into your breath, your stillness, it's an absolute default. And although there are likely to be a lot of external events, I mean, we can see that already, a lot happening out there that could be big Earth events or solar events or combination of them, plus whatever's going on geopolitically. This is actually an inner process, because it always is. It's always an inner, it's an inside job, that we are actually going through an explosion, an inner explosion of consciousness to take us to a higher state of being. And it's absolutely Uranus conjunct Sedna. It's absolutely where we are going. So it's like an inner explosion of awakening. So just know that, and don't instantly just focus on the external. Come back to the internal with peace. And if you can really stay in peace and heart coherence and steadiness, that will bubble wrap you to a large extent to make your individual transition smoother, but it inevitably, because we can't separate ourselves, feeds back to the collective. And that's one of the biggest gifts you can give to the collective, because if you're in the middle of a war or a fire, your house is being burnt out, you can't, it must be absolutely terrifying. And you can't possibly stay in heart coherence while that's happening. You're absolutely knocked off kilter. So that means those of us who can stay in our centers with coherence have to up our game, double our efforts to raise the coherence and love in the field, the collective, to settle things down in those extreme pockets. The more of us that are doing this, the easier the whole collective transition gets. Because people will often say to me, how bumpy is it going to get? It's as bumpy as humanity makes it. We are the co-creators. We're simply interweaving with the astrological energy to then make it manifest. So that's why I think specific prediction is often extremely difficult, because astrology is only half the picture. The other half is us, you and me. So the other thing I think, and again, I'll talk more about this in the next video, with Uranus moving into Gemini, I think this is the beginning of a strong freedom movement. All I was just saying about parallel social structures, I think there's going to be a very strong freedom movement, because people will have such a desire to live in their truth and their authenticity. And this new moon in Aries is a big, big, big part of that. So it's very exciting. It's very exciting, but just feel that shift from the moment your feet hit the floor in the morning. You decide on the emotion you're going to have running through that day. Joy, love, peace, compassion, whatever it is, you decide. Don't switch on your emails or your texts or the news and have that dictate to you what your state of being is. You decide. And if you're not living in a, absolutely terrifying war or extreme situation, we have to have joy in our lives every day. We have to find simple ways to have joy. And so really remember that love and joy are acts of defiance. And that is a great way to live. So I hope this has helped you. Quite a lot in there for that update, but my goodness, it's a big time. And as I say, the next update may be a little later, because I'm away for a week, sort of mid-month, but I will catch up again as soon as I can. God bless. Hope that's helped you. Bye for now.